friendship between Frank and Tim, I am feeling very, very pushed out because some people eat turkey on January 6th.
Yeah. Andrew wanted to get a flask for some reason.
Allegedly.
I'm too Baptist for that.
If you want me to do the pastoral things, a lot of the pastoral things don't happen between 9 and 5.
Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I am glad that you are here. The whole crew is here, and we are excited for today's show. I'm here sitting in, where are we? What city is this?
Safety Harbor, Florida.
Safety Harbor, Florida. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, in 2 feet of snow, we got Jeffrey Simpson.
Hey, hey.
Down in Sumter, South Carolina, we got Delmar Pete.
Hello, hello.
Next to me is Timothy Miller.
Hey, hey, hey.
And Andrew Larson.
I've been demoted to last.
I forgot what the order was.
I like that you don't even have a name. Tim and Andrew don't even have a name.
Andrew, you got to do like a Batman voice.
Friendship between Frank and Tim, I am feeling very, very pushed out.
Are you getting moved to the third wheel, Andrew?
Andrew. What was that, Del? I couldn't hear you.
You're getting moved to the third wheel now, huh?
I know. It's terrible.
How many meetings have they had without you already?
Oh, they carpooled here this morning.
Oh,
Nice.
listen,
I was like,
before we started the podcast, they already had insider stuff they talked about without talking to Andrew.
It's true.
I
true.
pulled up my phone to see where Tim was because he's usually running late. I was like, oh, Tim's on time this morning. This is great. And then I hear him pull up and I look out in the parking lot, and who gets out of the driver's seat? Frank. Frank's
Nice.
driving Tim's car around. I have been.
He's like driving
It's
Miss
fine.
Daisy.
Cool.
What?
I've known both of them longer.
He's probably wearing his socks
Whatever.
too.
There's a business deal happening in the background that we haven't talked about.
That's
But
true.
anyways, let's move forward. We got two amazing questions from Reddit that we're going to answer. Before we do that, we again have the Practically Pastoring Conference happening very soon. I would say a month and a half. We have a couple speakers lined up. We have tons of free stuff that we're going to give to the attendees of this conference. People are signing up. 2 people signed up this morning while we were severely delayed at Applebee's. It's a great time. So I want to encourage you to go to practicallypastoringconference.com or just go to practicallypastoring.com. There you can click on conferences and you'll be able to sign up for the Practically Pastoring Conference. You're not going to want to miss it. It's February 17th to the 19th. We still have left up the code Turkey20 if you want to save $20.
That's a good one.
Because some people eat turkey on January 6th.
Yeah, it's true.
Why
So
not?
so we hope to see you there. There is still all the great stuff happening. There's going to be a special pastors' wives event happening on that Tuesday. There is a couple beds available if you are coming by yourself to an Airbnb that has been generously provided by someone. So if you are interested, go to practicallypastoringconference.com. If you have specific questions like, hey, I want to come, but I want to know this, and this beforehand, reach out to any of us. We would love to get you there. practicallypastoringconference.com, February 17th to the 19th. And then we have an amazing sponsor, both of the conference and of the podcast. It is Church Merch.
Merch for your church.
They have generously sponsored this podcast, this conference. And if you have any church merch needs, you should check out Church Merch. If you go to the link in the description, you go to promotionsguy.com and then hover over to Church Merch. You can see all that they have. Andrew and Tim and I were looking at some of the things that they have. They have shirts. They have mugs.
You can get a Yeti with your church name on it.
Yeah. Andrew wanted to get a flask for some reason.
Allegedly.
I'm too Baptist for that. There was stickers. There is bags.
Polo shirts.
They have branded. So first off, when it comes to the world of like portable chargers, Anchor is a really good brand.
It's the brand.
And you can get customized like branded Anchor chargers. And I was like, that is sick. They're expensive, but they're really nice.
Could you imagine, like, hey, first time guest, we really want you to get plugged in. Here's a charger.
Yeah.
Boom.
Nice.
That's just off the dome. I got more. Keep.
So go to promotionsguy.com. You can go to the link in the show notes. And if they ask you, hey, how'd you hear about us? Tell them Practically Pastoring sent you. All right, guys. So I'm loving this pastors forum on Reddit. And so I found this great question. It's these 2 questions today. couldn't be more practical. All right. Here is the question I have for you guys. The title of it is curious what PTO, paternity, book stipend, Sundays off, hospitality stipend, and other extras you have. All right. So here's the question. Hey guys, just wondering what you guys are faring in the salary extras. I have 5 weeks of PTO. This includes sick time and 1 week carryover of the year, 12 Sundays off of preaching once a month, and I'm still at the church, but we have a guest lay preacher team in an effort to put more voices in the pulpit and utilize the preaching gifts of others in the body, where they stipend them about $150 for each guest. Also gives the pastor some breathing room. 2 weeks of year, 2 weeks for paternity leave. I guess they're having a baby in the new year, and so they get 2 weeks.
You can't claim that most years.
Yeah, 2 weeks paternity leave. And then he says, I'm interested in potentially doing more theological education and would like to see if anyone has any study leave allowance and for how long. I have some leave for denominational conferences, which is twice a year, but nothing pertaining to study leave. I'm also wondering if any of you have a book stipend. I really like to ask for $50 a month for commentaries or books to help further my study for preaching. My last church absolutely refused to give me a hospitality fund for things like coffee or lunch with visitors, which was nuts to me. I'd have to meet with people on my own dime. But my current church offers $100 a month for coffee visits. Do you have anything similar? And lastly, a pastor friend said to him that they have a budget for personal counseling and spiritual direction to be included, which I think is fantastic. So what kind of things have you guys had? Do you currently have? You wish you had? How can we help this person figure out what's best for them?
I think it's important to remember that all these things are negotiable. Like some things will be like your church culture, and that's a normal, necessary thing. But if you're hiring, if you're a senior pastor in your 60s, you probably don't need to negotiate paternity leave in there anymore. Maybe I don't know you, but there are all these things that make sense for different seasons. Again, some of the study leave stuff, or I want money in to go pursue another degree. Well, at some point you won't want that, or you won't need that anymore. So all of these things are seasonal, and they're all negotiable. So I think sit down with whoever is on your finance committee or your HR team or whatever it is that your church has and say, hey, can we talk about this? And sometimes it's, can I move this money from this category to that category? I'm not using this. Hey, I don't need to go to 2 denominational conferences. What if one of those became a couple time a year Zoom with a small group from the denomination? I'll still get that connection, but I don't need to get on an airplane, and we can do 1 seminary class per semester. There are ways to move things around without increasing budget. And also when it comes to any time of leave, I think that is the easiest thing to negotiate, because essentially anytime you get an extra week of leave, that's a 2% raise. So, hey, we can't do Christmases this year, but take the weeks from Christmas to New Year's off, boom, 4% bonus, because you're not working those weeks. So I think all of these things you can negotiate. You just have to know who to have the conversation with. And if I'm guessing you have 12 weeks off per year from preaching, you're probably the senior pastor. So you've got the sway, you've got the pull to get this stuff done. You just have to have what might be an awkward conversation for 5 or 10 minutes. But
okay, do you guys, what does study leave mean? Like, is that like
it's
time off for seminary?
Yes. Or now sometimes it might be a month long or whatever it is, but it's usually, hey, go to this conference for a week. It's not
okay.
Conferences is included.
It's a conference.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you, most seminaries or most of the bigger seminaries have some kind of an abbreviated semester. Most seminaries have some kind of like a winterim or a summer semester that's very abbreviated. So you could possibly go be on campus for a week in January or in May, and that could cover the study leave. But it's just, you're not off, you're not on vacation, you're just not there in person.
So it's like conference days.
Conference days.
It's like a separate thing.
But for study.
Cool. I think like all this is very reasonable. I've never heard of book budgets or coffee, like hospitality budgets broken down monthly like this. That's interesting. I've usually heard like, you get $1,200 a year or $1,400 a year for like in my last church, I think it was like $1,000 like a book budget for $1,000, and by book budget that included conferences, and then I think it was like 12 to 1,400 for the coffees and lunches and things like that for the year. So $100 a month for coffee visits and meals is actually reasonable, I think. $50 a month for commentaries. I mean, at some point, you don't
Right.
Your library is built up.
Yeah, your library is built up,
Right.
and
That's what I'm saying. Like all of these things, like you're not going to need
yeah,
all of these things at 63.
right. I mean, like, yeah. It's therefore, like you were saying, like maybe because I was even thinking, like at some point you don't need the paternity leave. Is there a way to rope that into something else, into the perks package, if you will?
Mhm.
But like I would negotiate. Like I have Logos, and so I have a lot of books that are more affordable because of that. And then I've found different ways to get like certain commentaries or books I want to read for free, whether it's like Libby or some sort of like
Steal them from a seminary, like,
yeah,
That's what Jeff does.
yeah. Go to
Just Google the name of the book in
Yeah.
PDF and see
Yeah.
what pops up.
go to Andrew's office and just take the books off.
I've been wondering.
Yeah, all his John MacArthur, but he's so many
Have a
John
guy
MacArthur books.
have a guy in your church who's got multiple doctorate degrees, and just go to his house and take books from his.
Yeah, just have lunch
He
with
doesn't
him.
Find a
even go to-
pastor who is retiring, and he'll give you his library.
No, but that for real,
Yeah.
that actually
That's happened.
True story.
That is
About
cool.
half of the library that I have is because Melissa's youth pastor
Yep.
died at 39. He had a heart condition that they didn't realize, and just it dropped dead. And his wife, I was starting seminary, and she was moving and said, "Hey, Andrew, I want you to have these." And so I have entire shelves. One thing that was just really serendipitous how it all worked out. One of the things of required reading at Dallas Seminary was the complete works of Louis Berry Schaeffer, his systematic theology.
Wow.
And so, but to buy it was $1 trillion, and there were like 2 copies in the library. So people were always fighting over it. And as we had moved to Texas, I was unpacking books, and there was the entire 9-volume set right there that had belonged to Melissa's youth
bro, the
pastor.
biggest flex on campus.
Yeah, I got my own.
Yep.
Did you walk around with it like in a backpack with the
Yeah,
binding showing?
all 9 of them. I just walked
Sup?
like this. What up,
Yeah.
everybody?
I just pulled up our budget for 2024. I don't know. This will kind of bleed into the next question, which hopefully is okay, about normal work week hours. But there is a category we have for school expenses, which is seminary for me, at $1,000 for the year. But the seminary that I go to here it's the oldest Catholic seminary in Maryland. And so they have an ecumenical institute, which is run by basically mostly non-Catholics. But it being a Catholic seminary means that it's very, very well endowed. And so classes are incredibly cheap. And they have a scholarship program where if I pay a third and the church pays a third, the seminary covers the other third. So classes are right at about $800 or $900 a piece, which is like crazy cheap for seminary level classes. So that $1,000 a year could potentially cover 3 classes. Which is about what I would do I would only go in the fall, because in the spring I'm coaching and a bunch of stuff, and then in the fall I could take 2 or 3 classes, and basically I would be out $600 to $900, and the church would cover the other side of that, and then the seminary covers the other third. So they do that for me, and then meals and entertainment we have at $800 for the year, which is, might seem kind of low, but it doesn't really happen that often for me. I have a lot of meetings with people where they pay. Just because they just want to. And I just honestly, I never really even think about it. I mean, I use it so infrequently to take somebody out. Honestly, most of the time when I take somebody out, it's like for coffee. I mean, I'm going to buy myself a coffee anyway. So I don't really have that much of a problem buying my own coffee. And a lot of times the other person will be like, "Oh, I got it. No, don't worry about it." Or we meet at the church and just make coffee here. But a lot of times when I take somebody out, it's like for a meal. And so it'll be like, a $50 expense, but not very often. And so I don't know if I've ever even come close to that $800 mark. But that's just the culture of our church. Maybe it's just different here. We don't honestly have that many coffee places to go to nearby. So when I meet with people, a lot of times it is what it is. It doesn't, I meet with people here at the church. We just have a Keurig or whatever. But if we go somewhere, a lot of times the people that I meet with, I'm sorry. The people that I meet with will typically pay for it. Or sometimes, depending on the coffee shop, there is one that we go to where we know the owner, we get, they don't charge us. So that's pretty cool. So, we get a little bit here. And then as far as books and stuff, honestly, like, I don't think we have a budget for like Christian education, and that's part of that. But like you said, Frank, I have my library's pretty set, and the only time I'm buying books like for the church is if we're doing a series in a new book of the Bible, and I want to pick up another commentary or two. And like I said, I mean, the treasurer of the church is the one person in my church who is the most prone to be like, you should buy this book. So fairly often I will come in my office and there'll be a new commentary sitting on my desk, or I'll just be like, hey, is it cool if I grab this? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So for me, it's just like keeping in touch with my treasurer. So that stuff is taken care of. But as far as the like time off and things, that is very informal at my church. And part of me hearing this question is thinking maybe we need to formalize it a little bit more. But what I don't get
no, I don't want anything formalized.
What I don't get in PTO. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to know, like, I see Dell shook his head, you shook your head. I'm on the verge of Jeff just for transparency's sake. Like, if anyone were to like, if I was in Jeff's shoes and like I'm at a smaller church trying to protect it and standardize some things, and people are gonna like maybe possibly like ask questions, I think the transparency of actually I've given myself X amount of time off or whatever. I don't know. The elders give it to you, whatever the case may be. What would be the hesitation? What would be the fear in that?
As much as I want to protect the church, I want to protect my wife and kids more.
Yeah.
And
couldn't Jeff be generous?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But
well,
I've been in both.
You didn't hear what I was going to say about my weekly schedule, though, because that factors into this quite a bit.
Sure.
Like, there's literally no expectation of office hours.
Yeah.
I control my entire schedule.
Well, save that. I want to hear more about that in the next
but
question.
that goes to PTO and stuff, because the rhythm of my life is not so structured. But go ahead, Del.
No, I've been in hyper like controlled vacation to where it's like if you need to take a half a day, you have to put in for that 2 weeks ahead, and then your boss knows everything you're doing because he's approving everything, and it's a control mechanism. I've been in a church where vacation is a control mechanism. Where I'm at now, when we take vacation, I inform an elder or the elders. It's not like this is not documented, right? But we our rule is don't abuse it, and we're the same way with money. We're the same way with time. When it comes to, for example, the coffee and stuff, in my own life, I'm really thrifty. I know a lot of my library. I go yard selling every Saturday, and I find really good books at yard sales. I've found good books at Goodwill. I will purchase them every now and then, but I try to be extremely thrifty because there's ladies in our church that can only give $10 a week. So if I'm blowing $10 a week on coffee, I've just spent little Miss Betty's hard-earned whatever on coffee. Not saying coffee's not bad, but my rule of thumb is we're not here to reap resources. We're here to steward them. So I have a standing appointment with congregants every Wednesday. Because that's a standing appointment, I put it into my life. I put it into my personal schedule. So my personal finances. So I buy my coffee on Wednesdays, kind of like Jeff, because I set that up. Now, if someone hits me up and says, hey, I want to go out with you, want to go do something, that's a different thing. If I'm initiating, so a lot of times I pick a place where I know it's not going to be as much. And then another rule of thumb when it comes to it, and I know it's just kind of goes without saying, if I'm on the church's card, don't get what you wouldn't get yourself if you were on your own card. You know what I'm saying? Like
steaks, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I'm going to I get a small black coffee. That's what I always get, whether I'm on my church card or mine. But we do have outreach budget. One thing I would say in regards to how you're breaking it down, sometimes you need to have the spots in your budget for it, but sometimes having it so defined limits what you can do with your money. So instead of having, book fund, furthering education fund, maybe just have one fund. I think one of you guys said you have that, where it's just education. And it's up to the pastor's discretion. I mean, they hired you. They should trust you that what you're spending is on education, whether that's going to a conference and learning, whether that's paying for school, whether that's paying for books. If you can all get that in one fund, and then keep your paper trail, because budget time is a great way to reveal to your elders what you actually need. if you're this question just came in, so chances are a lot of churches are just re-upping your budget. This is a great year for you to itemize your own budget to show exactly what you spend it on outside of what the formal budget is in the church. And then the next year you could say, wow, I spent a lot more in this area. That way you don't have to ask for more money. You might can just say, hey, we need to take less money from the coffee, add it to the education, because that seems to be where we're spending more. So I think being very conscious of what you're spending your money on in your budget is going to help you with pinning down some of these finances.
I want to, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I would say too, you have to know as the leader, as the pastor, typically you're either a spender or a saver. Like most of us fall into one of those categories. And so know which one you are, because it's going to change your relationship with like the budget. So I am more of a spender. It's easy for me to overspend. I'm not doing it to be malicious. I'm not a detail oriented person. So I need someone like a treasurer that I need to be accountable to, who can say to me, hey, like, you're getting a little overboard with the coffee. Can we pull back on that? And I need to be willing to go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, for the next month, I'm not going to do any of that, And so, but if you're a saver, you might have to be told, hey, listen, we have this money. We need you to spend it on yourself and invest in yourself. So accountability is really important. And I would say too, like these conversations about what's on paper to me is a little bit like if you've ever done marital counseling and people are starting to talk about the prenup, if they had one. It's like once you start talking about the what's on paper, it should be a flag that, hey, there might be some relational stuff going on here, because hopefully you want to be the kind of leader who is the kind of person for whom it's easy to trust with money and time and accountability, and the same with your elders. So if you're having conversations all the time with like, well, this is what we agreed about, that means there's a relational issue of trust there that you probably want to dig into before, you're talking about what's on, the dotted I's and the crossed T's on the paper, because that's just there as a guardrail. I rarely ever talk about the budget, but if we need to, it's because, hey, there's an issue going on and we don't want to break relational trust.
My only, I keep mulling over what Andrew and Del said about the PTO thing. Being in a church that was smaller, so I was in a smaller church when I was a first time youth pastor, and it was funny. It was like a smaller church, but it had very strict like PTO, like what you guys talked about. If you want to take a half day in 2 weeks, you have to get that request and all that kind of stuff. And then when I was in Arkansas, almost the same size church. And like, it was very flexible. Like basically I just had to like tell someone I wasn't going to be there and it was fine. When I was at this larger church in Milwaukee that had multiple staff, like at its peak, there was probably like 30 plus staff people. One thing I understood being in that organization was if you don't have a good system on checking on PTO and checking on like people's schedules, it's ripe for people to take advantage of it, because there's so many moving parts that you just assume so-and-so is working and they're just like playing video games at home. This is especially true during COVID when people were working at home and you didn't know what was going on. And so all I have to say is this: I'm not saying that you have to have a strict relationship with PTO. I'm thinking as a lead pastor, having staff under you, I think the name of the game is going to be trust, like we guys talked about, and like hiring people that you can trust, and then like having those check-ins. Like Tim, I'm thinking about you where there is no office hours, which we'll talk about that in a second. Right. But you're trusting that everybody on your staff is working. And that is so you're trusting that when they say I'm going to take PTO, that they're not also just PTOing every day of the week. And they're not just like your youth pastor is not just downloading DYM sermons an hour before youth group. So I just think that like, it'd be good, kind of like Jeff talked about with the budget, with a treasurer, just so you have accountability, at least with your elders, saying, hey, I have 3 weeks of PTO and here are the times I'm going to take it. Obviously, I don't have office hours. Obviously, if I'm sick, I can do this and that. And I know no one's holding me to the pressure on that. But like, I want to make sure that if anyone presses me, I can say, here are my time off, and here's how I'm doing it.
I think a monthly report is a good thing. Like if you can write yourself, like here's a pastoral report. Here's the things I did this month. Here's what projects I'm working on.
I do want to add. Oh, go ahead.
Just so they see that where your time is going.
I do want to add this. Same with spending. There tends to be similar work ethics. There's people who like you crush it all the time. And then you got some who are like, well, I like to. Yeah. One good thing about the system of logging your vacation PTO is it is an accountability that you are taking your time off. When I quit my last job, I realized I had months of time I had not taken, and that's because I didn't check, and I just kept working. I realized I didn't take a week, and that's a really bad thing. And I would say this as a pastor, especially if you're in a church with staff under you, even if you do not keep record of it, you need to know that your staff are taking vacation. Because especially some of them, they want to work hard. They want to, make the church thrive. Some of them, that's how you enter burnout, which I think is a conversation for another episode we're going to do. But a good thing about logging your PTO is it is an accountability system. Not that you're not working, but also that you're making sure your people are not working at some times and not running too hard and burning out. That is a great thing to have, even if you don't have the numbers and you got to check it off and get it authorized and everything. You do need to, I would say, keep a log of the time you're taking off, just so you can reflect back and be like, okay, why's this year been difficult? Man, I was only out of the pulpit 3 weeks this year and I didn't take my wife anywhere. Or you can look back on it and say, why am I in such a bad place this year? I was out of the pulpit 12 times and took 4 weeks. That's a whole different place in my heart I have to excavate. And your vacation can help you determine where you are spiritually when you're going through burnout even.
I think Jeff, when you're talking about being a spender or a saver, so often when it comes to, hey, I don't want to swipe the church card for this, I don't want to take people out for coffee, you need to remember that whether it be your elders, your congregation, however your budget is approved, a group got together and said, hey, we want our pastor to go out and spend $100 a month or whatever it is, taking people to lunch, taking people to coffee. So you might think, I just feel frivolous saving that. No. The people that determine what the budget should be are saying that part of what we want you to do with your job is to go out and spend this money with these people.
As a representative of us.
As a representative of us, we want you to spend this money to take people out. But I think one of the things that probably affects me and Jeff more than the rest of you guys is when you are the staff person. So the past 2 weeks I was on vacation, and both of those Sundays I preached. The one Sunday I flew home to preach and then flew back out that afternoon. And then this past Sunday I got home Friday night at 11 p.m. and still preached on Sunday. So one of the reasons that it's nice to not have hard and fast policies when you especially are a smaller staff is because you're working while you're on vacation still. I mean,
it's not less work for me to be gone.
That's true.
It's more work to have a guest speaker sometimes, especially again, if you're like me and Jeff and you're also running the live stream and doing all the other things, because then you got to get that figured out with the high school volunteer that's left behind. The end of that question was asking about other creative things that people have done. Right. This one probably impacts me and Tim more than anybody else. But the last senior pastor that I worked for, and I still don't know if I love this idea or hate it, when his kids started driving, he asked for a car to be put into his compensation package. He was like, I don't want to take the $350 a month for a car payment or the car payment and the insurance or whatever out of my salary package, and I want there to be a church lease of a vehicle because that way he was on the church insurance as the primary driver, and he still got to stay the primary driver on his vehicle at home that his teenagers then ended up driving. And so instead of spending $400 a month to have a 17-year-old driving his Toyota Corolla, he kept his insurance the same. And I don't know ethically how I feel about that because my kids aren't driving yet. Ask me in a couple years, but I just think that was a very creative way to be like, hey, I'm not asking for a raise. I'm saying, can some of my salary be allocated this way? I think you can do that with your time too. Hey, can some of my 5 weeks plus sick time, or whatever, be allocated towards a week? We want you to spend a week at a seminary. We don't care what you're studying. We want you to be on campus in a theological academic environment 1 week a year. You can allocate money to certain pockets. You can allocate time to certain pockets as well.
This may go to this conversation with me with coaching. I quote unquote a professional coach. I get paid to coach at the high school, but that means from March to May, basically every weekday from 2:00 until about 6:00, I'm busy, like without fail. And so I remember the conversation I had with the elders. They were all on board with it. There's an advantage to them, obviously, which we're seeing some fruit of now. We've got relationships built in the community and people are part of our church that weren't before just because of baseball. But also there's an advantage to me. Like, I love it. And it was good for my health. I'm out. I'm running around. I'm with, I'm physically active at least for those 3 months a year. I'm doing something that I love to do, and there is like a stress relief in it. I go at 2:00. I'm not thinking about church stuff at all until, the next morning. And so it's like this great thing that the church allowed me to do. And I'm kind of double dipping. I'm getting paid to be the pastor, but I'm getting paid to coach too. And so that's another kind of creative, sort of non-formal way that I view as like, it's not a raise really, but they're letting me have my time be used for something else that I'm kind of able to make money on too.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I'm a big fan of perks in the salary package. I don't know that you have to have them broken down so specifically, but letting your pastoral staff know that they're there and they're available to them and they should utilize them is real big for me. Like we hired 2 full-time staff in the last 15 months, and one of the ways I was able to, I don't know, like if entice is the right word, but like, hey, we want to show that we care about you. We're going to offer some things inside the salary package that's not just going right to your paycheck, but also additional perks. So I'm looking at the 25 budget right now for Lakeview, and I have my continuing education fund, which I've had a continuing education fund since I was the director of student ministries in 2010 at Lakeview, and it's very flexible. So that can be book purchases, that can be seminary stuff, that can be classes, that can be conferences. So it's a broad category, but if it's going to further my education in some way, shape, or form, that's where I use my Audible. So I have an Audible subscription. That's part of my continuing education. So I continue to read every month. So I hear what this guy was saying in the question, but I don't know that you have to have everything broken down so specifically, as long as it makes sense in a general category. So for us, we have 2 main categories for our pastors. We have continuing ed, and then we have something we call the pastoral allowance or pastoral professional expense category. So Frank and I, being the only 2 full-time pastors on staff at Lakeview, we actually share the professional expense category. So it's in that category that we would
iPhone
expense things like my iPhone or our lunch that we had today, or our lunches that we do with congregation members weekly. We don't have an office at Lakeview. We don't have office hours. So most of our meetings are over a meal or over coffee. And if it's a Lakeview sanctioned meeting, I'm probably not paying for it because I have an allowance, like Andrew said, that people are expecting me to use. So that's what I use for those things. Now, that could get sticky because it's a general category. So if I ever had a question, I would reach out to an elder and say, hey, I need this. Would it be okay if I used my professional expense account to purchase this for ministry? And there's no issue getting approval for things. So you shouldn't be afraid to ask. Like if there's a specific need, right? Frank reached out before we hired him and said, I need a laptop to work. So yeah, part of the drill was making sure Frank had a laptop. And then I realized I had 2 other employees that I had not provided laptops for. So we went out and made sure they had laptops as well. So there's just, little things to make sure people have what they can to get the job done. But then something that I thought was really fun, Frank and I went to a conference a couple of months ago, and we sat in a little breakout session with a lead pastor who just talked about staff perks and some of the ways that they're able to keep their staff, the quality of life up and high, and like they actually enjoy working for this particular church. So they got really creative because it wasn't just about increases in their salary every year, which are great, but there's other ways that you can improve the quality of the staff. And I'm just going to go through some of these, which are pretty awesome. They had a date night credit, and it was use it or lose it. So you got a certain amount of money. I think it was like $120 $120 a month.
Yeah.
You could use that credit to take your spouse out on a date. If you didn't use it, it's gone. But you take your spouse out, you save the receipt, you turn it in, cool. And the church reimburses you to make sure you are taking your spouse out at least once a month. They also had a $100 mental health credit. So if you need to go see a counselor or anything like that's available to you. A gym membership credit for $50 a month. And all of these things were not built into the salary package. You swiped your personal card, then you submitted the receipt, because that way, hey, if I don't use this, I don't get it back. So it's you pay for it. The church then reimburses you for it. There was also some childcare opportunities they had for their staff, different things like that. And that kind of got my wheels spinning too.
Because if you don't have those, or if it's like, hey, we could give you this $400 a month,
right?
the stewardship part of my brain is going to say, well, I should probably take that and higher salary, and provide for the family.
But I'm going to buy groceries. I'm going to pay bills.
But then, and I got to pay taxes on it. Mm-hmm. But by doing this, it's no, this isn't the $4,800 a year in raise that we could be giving you. This is.
Yeah, and what was cool is he said when they did their annual reviews, like what the staff were saying was they loved these perks that were available to them. Like it doesn't seem like a lot, but they were a really big deal, and the staff stayed longer. Like that's important to me because if you've ever had to hire staff, it is way more difficult to find someone new than it is to work through an issue and retain an employee.
They didn't just say that. They said that there were people in their church who were offered other opportunities that paid more, but they stayed at their church because if they took the other job, they would lose like all the stuff they just talked about. There were also like audible credits, like it was just all these small things that like, sure, you could add into a salary package or whatever, but like you get them and there's a quality of life that you can't get anywhere else.
And I like the use it or lose it idea because then it forces you to do that date night. Like,
and if you
can't take that money for something else.
And if they don't do it, the church saves $150 that month or whatever the cost was. Here's the next question. So real short and sweet. What are your office hour expectations? This gentleman is interviewing at a church as a solo pastor. The older folks in the church would like him to do 9 to 5 office hours, which he agrees is outdated. He said he worked at a church where they let him do 9 to 1 in the office, and in 4 months they had 3 drop-in visits. People just don't drop in to see him. So what are your thoughts?
Drop in to see them and they won't care. Yeah. I'm serious. Go visit them during that 9 to 5 time period. Go drop in on the people that are wanting you to be in the office, and magically they won't care about your office hours that much anymore. That's my thoughts. In our church, we don't have a culture of expectation of me being here. I mean, I have a sign up outside of the door that I come into this building. I think I have 9 to 3, and generally speaking, I am here from 9 to 3. But part of it is that I mean, just shout out to my church. Like, they're just cool. So there's that. I mean, I'm just happy to be here. But I think a lot of the people here just realize I got 3 little kids at home, so my schedule is going to be kind of flexible. But I think if you're doing the job and you're preaching good sermons and you're leading well and doing all those things that they expected you to do, it just wasn't part of the conversation when I was hired. And I would want to ask why. Like, is there something that needs to happen in those office hours that you're expecting of me? And one of the things that people thought other people warned me about when I came here was because I live in a parsonage, like literally across the parking lot. People were like, oh, people are going to show up at your house all the time. It's going to be the worst. Never happens. In the 8 years I've been here, I think someone has shown up at my house unexpected, like once a year, maybe. And that was those times it was serious and it was worth it. But I mean, we have cell phones. Like, people just call me on my cell phone and say, can you meet? And I typically, yes, I can. Or sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not at the church. I'm actually kind of over by your house. Do you want to meet at your house, or do you want to go to this place or that place? So for me, it hasn't been that big of a deal. But if it's part of the hiring process, maybe what I might do is say, well, is it possible for us to have like a test period? Can we go 3 months and maybe pick 1 or 2 days a week where I'm there for a specified time? And then other than that, I manage my own schedule. Because if you're a solo pastor, there's going to be things that come up. I'm assuming this is a small church. Like, random things are going to come up that you have no control over. For instance, the water heater is going to break. Guess what? You're the only staff. You got to figure out how to deal with it. Hire a plumber.
Between 9 and 5, I will.
Yeah, go right.
Wow.
Go to Home Depot, get it. Like, you're going to have to do weird stuff that you didn't expect. Today, I'm shoveling the sidewalks outside of the church when I get off this podcast because I'm the solo pastor, and that's just what we're doing. So I'm not going to be in the office today until 5. And, there's just no expectation of that for me. So I would definitely don't let this, if this is a deal breaker for you, then, you need to talk about it in the interview process. Because if you just think, well, it's not going to be that big of a deal, and you say yes, you're going to get there and be frustrated.
I'm guessing that there's a reason the church wants this.
100%.
And it's probably because the last pastor was lazy and took advantage of it. So, Jeff, like you said, if you're doing the job, that should be sufficient. So do the job, work hard, and don't worry about the rest. I have an office administrator who's here from 9 till 1 or Monday through Thursday. And so I try to be here when the office staff is here. But, as soon as we hit end here, I'm leaving to go pick kids up from school. Typically, I am in the office from about 9:30 till 2:30. But I also spend about 20 hours a week on my laptop on the couch at home. I'm going to a soccer game tomorrow night because we have a kid in the church and it's senior night. And so we're going to go celebrate her. And if you're in the office 9 till 5, the Department of Labor has recently said that you cannot volunteer at your place of employment.
Right.
So, which is another whole sticky thing for part-time youth pastors. Okay, go to camp and expect to be paid 24 hours a day for those hours. Mm-hmm. But if you want me to do the pastoral things, a lot of the pastoral things don't happen between 9 and 5. So, let me show you how capable I am of doing the job. And then I think Frank does a really good job of using Calendly. Hey, here are my free blocks of time during the week. If you want to drop in and meet with me, schedule something and I will meet you wherever. It doesn't need to be in my office. And it can be if that's where I am.
At Lakeview for 9 years, we had office hours.
Yeah.
I was 5 days a week, 9 to 5 until the last 2 years we went from 9 to 4. And then we made the shift during COVID to go at home. And the report from all the staff, including myself, was all of our productivity increased dramatically. Like we got so much more done because we weren't constantly distracted with silly
each
things.
Other.
Sometimes each other, for sure. And look, our drop-ins were typically salesmen. They were almost, I would say 90+% were solicitors trying to sell us
copiers,
a copier, a cleaning service, or something like that. And so it really just took a lot of our time away from the actual ministry we needed to get done. So now that we've been home officing for nearly 5 years, the conversation has started to increase because the staff has increased. Do we need a return to office hours? And if so, what does that look like? I mean, it's something Frank and I have been talking about for our staff. We actually had a kind of a heated conversation at staff meeting back in November because we do have at least one staff member who said, I would actually prefer more office hours because I'm more productive in the office. And then we have others who say, well, I'm way less productive in the office. So
does that person have like wild kids or something?
Maybe
like wild little children are trying to get out of the house.
It's very tricky.
So we're okay.
I think there's a healthy balance because we do have weekly meetings.
No, I totally get that. I have to come into this office.
I would love to have the weekly meetings all at the same time. Like the more I could get done, because I'm not going to sermon prep if I have a bunch of meetings that day. So I would much prefer to schedule all of my meetings back to back to back to back in one day. That way I have 2 full days to get my sermon prep done. So we're discussing now a hybrid office hours approach, mainly for our full-timers. Our part-timers, when they were hired knowing you're not going to have office hours other than staff meeting. So for our full-timers, that discussion is going to be a little different.
We only have one person with actual hours, and that's our secretary. And that's a good thing because at least lets the people know this is when the church is accessible if you need to have a conversation. That's not a bad thing. If you're going to be a solo pastor doing your own office hours, which may be off campus, we're in an interview process here. So I'm thinking through, if I'm interviewing, could you just get the office phone redirected to your phone? That's one way to maintain an office hour thing. Also, I would ask questions like, okay, like for me, example, I have a Tuesday night community group at my house. My wife has a Monday night community group at my house, which I have to watch the children for, but it's church related. I have a Wednesday night group that meets at church. So if I'm having to pull 9 to 5 and then 3 nights of my week are tied up at groups, plus I may go to a family event on a Friday or a Saturday event, we're talking that's way more than 40 hours. So I would ask them, how do they deal with reality of pastor schedules versus this sounds real nice. At the end of the day, it sounds like a hybrid of a reluctancy to move forward plus possibly a trust issue. That seems like two things. And or how about this? It could just simply be they don't know that they don't know. It could be a simple conversation. These people could be very gracious people, and that could just be maybe their last pastor was very long tenured, been there decades. That's the way he'd always done it, so they don't know. If I'm having to do office hours, how am I going to go out and have coffee with other people? And then I think if you could win that battle, I do think one thing, and even say this in the interview process, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be accessible. For example, I have I guess you would consider a satellite office at my house. I have a whole different building behind my house. It's a studio, and I'll tell my coworkers, hey, I'm going to the studio. I have a lot of video work to do for the church today, or I have some technical work. I could get more done when I have the tools, and the tools are in my satellite office. I'm still accessible. Everything is still open. For me, office hours means accessibility. That's if I want to be generous towards this conversation in an interview. Are you saying that you want me to? I could totally be accessible. I think you should. Now, that being said, just like vacation, if you don't have a vacation allowance, you need to be very transparent with where you're spending your time. If you don't have office hours, you need to be transparent. First of all, you need to be seen around the office. Let's be honest. Like I may not have office hours, but I have a time that I go in every day, unless something's crazy. And then if I'm late or if my coworkers are late, we're always text each other, hey, yo, I got a meeting I'm at. Because it's just courtesy and it's a general accountability. If I'm dipping out early, hey man, I just want you to know I was here 14 hours yesterday, so I'm going to kick out early and spend some time with the kids. I think there's still accountability in that. And if you're a solo person in the staff, say, okay, so is there a deacon who kind of oversees this? That could be my person. Hey, yo, I'm peacing out because I was here 14 hours yesterday. To me, it seems like accessibility. So that's where I would drive that conversation in the interview process. And you're going to find out really quick if there's a trust issues. I really hope that this guy's not going to be paying the price for a past pastor's sins. That's really the thing you want to. The heart of this issue, it seems.
Yeah, I was going to use the word availability, but this basically that's what's underneath this conversation.
Yeah.
I remember when I first came here, one of the older folks in my church said to me, you really just need to make sure you're available to the congregation. And I was like, yeah, of course, because that seemed like normal to me, but there must be a reason he said that.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I would say as a solo pastor, I'm assuming in a small church with older folks, you can get creative about the way you're available to them for conversations. Like, for instance, this may sound kind of funny, but there have been times when I've gone to the grocery store with people, and we're having conversations about life and their spiritual. And there's times when there's a guy in my church who is quadriplegic and so he has a hard time going to the grocery store sometimes by himself. And I have a great relationship with him. He's a funny guy. So sometimes we'll just randomly there's a place here called Grocery Outlet, and it's an outlet store of groceries, and he loves it. And I'll just go there with him, and we'll just hang out for a few hours, and that's a visit. But I'm getting some groceries too, so it doesn't have to be super strict. You can get creative with how that visitation and availability happens. It doesn't always have to be in the ways that you think of, the pastor's in his office, and I'm going to go talk to him. Let yourself be a regular person. That's what they need. They need a regular person who happens to be their shepherd. And for me, that's been creative. Meals after church is another big one. If you're available for that, we kind of strategically rotate the little groups, pockets of people in our church that we go out to eat with after church on Sunday. But we're always going out with people. And then, that way it's not like people feel like they never see me or they never can get a hold of me. Now, there are people who will have this attitude of I don't want to bother you. I'm really sorry. And I have to tell those people visiting with you is literally the most important part of my job. Prepping sermons is important, but I'm here for people. So you're not bothering me. And so those people you want to be maybe a little more mindful with, but I would just say get creative with it. If you're a solo pastor, you're very flexible. There's you can kind of do whatever you want. So take advantage of that in a good way.
In youth ministry, I used to tell leaders this, and I exampled it by doing it myself. So a lot of my volunteer leaders in student ministry didn't have Costco memberships, and our church had a Costco membership. And I would say, hey, I need to get with you. Would you like to go to Costco? And that was a big deal, especially for a younger, early 20 something. That's I never go to Costco. Why would I go to Costco? This is great. So go to Costco, let them use my card so they can buy whatever super pack of things they want, and then go pay $5 for 2 slices of pizza or something. And then go get them a rotisserie chicken. I'm go get a chicken. It's $5. And that was such a huge win.
It's on the church card.
It's on the church. Oh yeah, I would buy the slice of pizza. But then I told my leaders hey, if you are passing a student's house, now you gotta be gender specific, all that kind of stuff. But if you're passing a student's house to go to Target or Walmart or whatever, the grocery store, I dare you to text or call that student, hey, I'm heading by your house to go to Target. Would you like to come with me? And the kids are yeah, I'm bored, whatever. And they'll go, and then that will be their time with the student. So it's that, Jeff, that idea is so
that
clever.
Almost resets with retirees. It's the same thing. hey, I'm about to go
Yeah.
to the store. Do you want to come?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because recent retirees are a lot like as you retire, at first it's like you're 16, you just got your license, nothing but freedom. And then once you get to 72, 73, it's like you're 14 and you don't quite have a license yet. So you've got the mind of an adolescent, but you don't have the freedom. It just goes in reverse order because that's who lives in my front yard. It's my parents. They're getting old.
Yeah. But like, I love that being creative with that. This kind of goes back to, spending time with people, but like, I would suggest that if you're in the interview process, I think Andrew said this earlier, like everything's negotiable. Everything is able to like kind of talk about and be like, hey, we want to be realistic here. And what if for the first 6 months, I do have a set time. And if the evidence is only 3 people show up in the next 6 months as a drop in, then like, I want to change that. But like 9 to 5 every day is crazy. Hopefully also it's 9 to 5, 4 days a week. And if you're working 5 days a week and Sunday, that's a rough time.
And hopefully no evening small groups. Which if you're in a smaller, older church, you probably don't have evening small groups because they don't want to drive in the dark.
And that's the flip side of this is like if you are, let's say you're a youth pastor, but this is like a lead pastor position, solo pastor. If you're doing Sunday night Bible studies or Wednesday night Bible studies or any kind of like evening thing, I mean, when I was a youth pastor,
Going to football games.
When I was a youth pastor, I would schedule my week as I don't start my Wednesday until like noon because I'm there till like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, right? I mean, this is a very contextual question, but I agree with the idea that 9 to 5 is not a wise thing. Also, I'm noticing this right now as people from Lakeview want to meet with me is I'm saying, hey, when do you want to meet? And they say after work. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to figure out time after 5 p.m.
Yep.
That makes sense with my family and stuff like that. 9 to 5 would not be wise.
The important thing to remember too, like in this conversation, is we are not exchanging time for money as pastors. They are paying us for expertise and leadership, not for like a shift of hours that we do. So that's important, they're paying us to not have to have a job, to support our families and to support us and to invest in us. And so we're not exchanging hours for dollars like you would in a shift job. And I think that's just an important thing to remember.
I think that should be the t-shirt for the Practically Pastoring Conference, not shift work. I think we've just landed on it, Jeff. That's great.
There we go. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you got something out of it. And hopefully if you have any questions, you can join our Facebook group. Just go on Facebook and search for Practically Pastoring. And when you find that Facebook, I would love for you to submit your questions. We always joke if you submit anonymously, there's a higher chance of it getting on the podcast. But in general, if you submit questions, there's a good group of over 1,000 pastors from across the country, some from outside the country too, that would love to help you. And any questions that were like, oh, this is good for more people to see and hear, we'll bring it onto the show. With that being said, we want to also invite you to the Practically Pastoring Conference. Come on. Sign up soon. We want you there.
February 17th through 19th.
Yeah,
Lakeview Church.
I'll try to be appropriate.
It's going to be great.
Might not be.
Ish.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, 2 feet of snow. What's the temperature over there?
It's like 25 or 30 right now.
It's 73 degrees and partly cloudy.
Yeah.
That said, at 6 p.m. we have a cold front coming through.
Jeff, it might dip into the 60s.
It's going to be
Whoa.
55 tomorrow.
Better make sure that the heat's working good. I did lose heat
the
for a
space
couple
heaters
days.
out.
And
that's
it's
terrifying.
50 degrees in the morning in the
You were
house.
looking at heat oil because you live in the 1910s or something.
I do.
That's
They
awesome.
had to kill a whale just to heat Jeff's
They
house.
installed they built these houses in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Oh, I was right. All right. So with that being said, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Delmar Pete.
I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is Practically Pastoring. See you next week.